She lost her job after a 30-second phone call to her grandfather. No yelling, no mistakes, just a soft voice speaking Tagalog in a luxury restaurant. But one powerful man didn't like what he heard. What followed exposed the ugly truth about silent discrimination, shook a city, and turned one quiet woman into a voice for thousands. Who is Brielle Carter? And how did her private moment spark a public reckoning? Stay with us. This story will change how you see silence and power. Where are you watching from? Drop your city below and subscribe to Soul and Grace to hear more powerful stories like this. The soft clatter of polished silverware and faint hum of lo-fi jazz filled the dining room at Sora and Flame. The kind of place where the wine list had its own leather-bound binder and the wait list for Tuesday dinners stretched 3 weeks out. It was late afternoon and the lunch rush had just tapered off. A fine drizzle misted the windows, casting pale gray shadows across the black marble floors. Brielle Carter stood by the service counter, meticulously polishing a spotless wine glass for the third time, more out of habit than necessity. Her black uniform was crisp, her hair pulled back into a low bun, not a strand out of place. This was her rhythm. Precise, quiet, invisible unless needed. That's how she'd survived 3 years here. To the regulars, Brielle was a fixture. Professional, graceful, always anticipating a need before it was spoken. She was respected but not celebrated, relied on but rarely acknowledged. She didn't mind. Not really. She preferred the calm, the silence that gave her control. What most people didn't see was that beneath her composed exterior, she carried the weight of generations, of culture, of loss, of love for one man who had always been her anchor, her grandfather Tito. That day, as she adjusted a stack of hand-folded napkins, her phone buzzed once in her apron pocket. A glance. The screen lit up with a name that made her stomach twist. Tito. He never called during the day unless something was wrong. Instinctively, she moved to the small alcove between the wine rack and the espresso machine, just a few feet off the floor, but enough to feel momentarily hidden. She answered in Tagalog, voice soft, respectful. Lolo? Anong nangyari? She whispered. Her brow furrowed as Tito spoke, his tone slightly confused. There had been a mix-up with his medication at the pharmacy. The new bottle didn't match the old one. He wasn't sure if he'd taken the right pills that morning. Brielle's voice stayed calm, steady. It's okay. I'll figure it out. I'll call them for you. Just don't take anything else until I confirm. It was no more than 30 seconds. She promised to call back during her break and reminded him gently to drink water and rest. Then she hung up, slipped the phone back into her pocket, and took a breath before stepping back into the quiet hum of the restaurant. She didn't see him watching her. Logan Wexler, seated alone at table 3, the private alcove reserved for VIPs, nursed a glass of 18-year-old Japanese whiskey. He was the kind of man who exuded control, of himself, of rooms, of narratives. A tech investor with cold eyes and the kind of presence that made servers walk faster and managers bow deeper. Brielle had served him a dozen times before. He never remembered her name, but he knew she got his water right. 2 ice cubes, never 3. Today his gaze lingered. Not with curiosity, but suspicion. Like he'd seen something foreign, and foreign meant threatening. Brielle, unaware, moved toward a nearby table to clear a plate. Logan's eyes tracked her the way a predator eyes motion in tall grass. He didn't say a word, not then. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. Nothing felt off, not immediately, but the air was heavier somehow. Later, when Brielle wiped down the bar again, she caught Maya's glance across the floor. Something unreadable in her friend's expression. At the time, she chalked it up to the weather. But the next morning, her name wasn't on the schedule. Not for the day, not for the week. She blinked, reread the list, then walked to the manager's office, where Rick Owens sat behind a half-closed door, fidgeting with a manila folder. She knocked lightly. Hey, I think there's been a mistake. Rick didn't look up. Come in, Brielle. We need to talk. The moment Brielle stepped into Rick's office, she knew this wasn't a scheduling error. The room smelled like citrus cleaner and denial. Rick sat stiffly behind his desk, a manila folder closed in front of him, like it held something heavier than paper. He offered her a tight, performative smile, the kind people wear when they don't want to admit they're about to betray you. Have a seat, he said. She didn't. Is there a problem? Rick hesitated, then folded his hands. Brielle, this isn't easy. We've received feedback, concerns, from a guest about your conduct yesterday. Her brows tightened. What conduct? He opened the folder slowly, as if buying time, revealing nothing inside but a blank form. You took a personal call during service hours. I wasn't on the floor, she said calmly. I stepped behind the service wall for less than a minute. It was about my grandfather's medication. Rick nodded as though her logic made sense, but still didn't matter. It's also about how the interaction was perceived. She blinked. Perceived? There were concerns about professionalism, about brand cohesion, communication. Her stomach dropped. Because I spoke Tagalog. He didn't answer directly, but his pause confirmed everything. She stared at him, seeing not a man but a shield. This wasn't his idea, it didn't have to be. He was just the messenger, the fall guy pretending to be the boss. This came from Logan, didn't it? Rick's eyes flickered. He's a high-value guest, investor level. And I'm disposable. I wouldn't say that. But you are saying it. Her voice was flat, tired, not angry, not yet. I've never been late. I've never called out. I cover shifts. I train new staff, and this is what I get? It's not personal. It's exactly personal, she said. You're telling me speaking to my grandfather in the only language he understands makes your patrons uncomfortable. Rick leaned back, suddenly looking very small behind the desk. Some guests prefer familiarity. Brielle's lips tightened into something between a smile and a grimace. You serve Korean short ribs and Japanese uni risotto, Rick. What exactly are they expecting? He didn't respond, just slid a final check and a pre-typed separation letter across the desk. The top line read, Failure to meet communication standards. She didn't even glance at the rest. She folded the paper in half, tucked it in her bag, and walked out without another word. At the lockers, Maya was waiting. One look at Brielle's face, and she straightened like someone had just slapped her. No, Maya said, her voice sharp. Tell me they didn't. Brielle said nothing. That just started untying her apron. Because of the call? Maya pressed. I guess Tagalog's threatening now. Maya leaned against the cold metal locker door, eyes burning. That's bullshit. Brielle nodded once. Yeah, but at least now I know what silence costs. You want to fight it? Maya asked. We could go to HR, go public. Hell, I'll post about it myself. Brielle paused, then shook her head. Let me breathe first. Later that night, back in her apartment, Brielle cooked rice and steamed tilapia the way her grandfather liked it. She called him after dinner, voice soft again, this time with no corners to hide in. Lolo, nawala ako ng trabaho, she said gently. I lost my job. His voice cracked. Because of me? No, she whispered. Because they don't want to hear people like us. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of unspoken history threading between them. After the call, Brielle curled up on her couch, scrolled through her phone, and saw a message from Maya. A screenshot of a post in a private Facebook group for local service workers. No names, no restaurant mentioned. Just a short story. A coworker got fired today. Not for being late, not for being rude, just for speaking her own language to her grandfather in a restaurant that serves Asian food. Underneath were dozens of comments, then hundreds. The post was spreading. And Brielle? She just stared at it, her fingers hovering over the screen. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Brielle didn't sleep much that night. Her phone buzzed every few minutes, notifications from strangers, private messages from old coworkers, even a few journalists trying to get her side. But she didn't reply to any of them. She wasn't ready. All she had wanted was to do her job, call her grandfather, and go home. Now, her quiet moment had become a public spark. The next morning, Maya showed up at her door with a coffee in one hand and a look of pure fire in her eyes. You're blowing up, she said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. Your story is everywhere. I didn't tell anyone anything, Brielle said, rubbing her temples. I didn't ask for this. I know, Maya said, but people are listening now. Brielle sat down, scrolling through her phone. Maya had been right. The anonymous Facebook post had been screenshotted, reposted, and dissected across multiple social platforms. By sunrise, someone had figured out the restaurant, Sora and Flame, and named it. Then someone else had dug up a video of Logan Wexler speaking at a startup conference and clipped it with the caption, "This the guy who gets women fired for calling their grandpa." The internet had done what it always did, made the invisible visible and the quiet loud. Her DMs were a flood of support, anger, and stories. So many stories. From people who had lost jobs for speaking Spanish in front of customers. From servers who had been told their accents made guests uncomfortable. From teachers, nurses, janitors, anyone who had been made to feel small for not fitting into someone else's narrow view of professional. At first, it overwhelmed her. She tossed her phone onto the couch and just stared at the ceiling. But the messages kept coming. And slowly, the overwhelm gave way to something else. Recognition, connection, strength. That evening, after hours of reading stories that mirrored her own, Brielle opened her notes app and began to type. Not a rant, not an accusation, just the truth. My name is Brielle Carter. I was fired last week from a restaurant in Seattle after a customer complained about me speaking Tagalog to my grandfather on the phone. I wasn't rude. I wasn't late. I wasn't unprofessional. I was just speaking to someone I love in a language that's part of me. That was all it took to lose my job. She hesitated before posting. Her thumb hovered over the button, heart racing. Then she thought about her grandfather, alone in Chicago, probably rereading the prescription bottle right now, worried about calling her again. She thought about every person who had messaged her, searching for a voice that sounded like theirs. And she pressed post. The response was instant. Within an hour, the post had thousands of likes and retweets. By midnight, it had made the rounds on advocacy pages, community groups, and even a few news outlets. An Asian American empowerment collective shared it with the hashtag Language is Heritage. So did several Black media platforms, igniting a rare but powerful overlap of solidarity. Brielle scrolled through the comments, eyes wide. Some messages made her tear up. Others made her furious, but all of them made her feel something she hadn't felt in days. Less alone. A teenage girl from Fresno wrote, "I showed your post to my whole class for my presentation on identity." A woman in Oakland messaged, "I stopped speaking Spanish at work years ago because my manager said it made people uncomfortable. I'm going to start again." A man in Toronto wrote, "They tried to erase you. Instead, you amplified all of us." Her phone rang. "Papo. I saw the news," he said in Tagalog. "Are you okay?" "I'm okay," she replied, her voice steady, tired, but okay. "You always had a strong voice, even when you were small," he said gently. Brielle smiled, eyes glassy. "It took losing my job to remember it." And she knew, deep down, this story wasn't finished yet. Not even close. 3 days after her post went viral, Brielle woke up to a cold, professional email buried among the flood of DMs and media inquiries. The subject line read, "Request for conversation, Sora and Flame response." She clicked it with a quiet dread in her chest. "Dear Miss Carter, we are aware of recent attention regarding your departure from Sora and Flame. We would like to discuss a resolution and ensure both sides are heard. Please let us know if you are open to a brief meeting. J. Roth, Legal Counsel." She read it 3 times, then shut her laptop without replying. She slipped on a hoodie and left the apartment, heading toward the only place in Seattle that made sense when the world didn't, the beach. The air was sharp, the wind brisk, but the crash of the waves gave her something steady to hold on to. She watched the water roll in, thinking about how this had all started with 30 seconds of soft Tagalog, how something so small, so loving could ripple so far. They didn't want to make it right. They wanted her quiet. But something inside her had shifted. The part of her that used to fold to keep the peace was gone. The next morning, she replied, "I'm open to a meeting. Let me know where and when." They met in a bland office suite near Westwood. No nameplates, just gray walls and the faint scent of overbrewed coffee. Brielle showed up in jeans, a white tee, no earrings. She wanted to be completely herself. Nothing polished, nothing curated, just real. Inside, J. Roth waited in a navy suit with gentle eyes and a voice like a hold tone. Kendra sat next to him, still as a statue, her fingers laced so tightly it looked painful. She didn't meet Brielle's eyes. "Thank you for coming," Roth said. "We want to offer a formal apology and a financial settlement in exchange for closure on this matter." Brielle tilted her head. "Closure for who?" Roth cleared his throat. "The restaurant has received backlash. There have been threats. We're trying to protect both parties." "You're worried about protecting a brand," she said quietly. "I lost my income, my health insurance, my peace of mind, because I spoke to my grandfather." "We're not here to debate." "No," she interrupted, her voice steady. "You're here to pay me off so I disappear." Roth adjusted his glasses. We are offering you 3 months severance and a written apology. We would, however, ask for confidentiality moving forward. She leaned forward, locking eyes with him. I want the apology to be public. No NDA. I want you to say I was let go because someone didn't like me speaking my language. That's the truth. Roth blinked. We can't admit liability. Then we don't have a deal. Silence filled the room like smoke. Kendra shifted, finally speaking. Her voice cracked on the first word. We'll issue a statement. Brielle turned to her. You knew it was wrong, didn't you? Kendra looked down. I should have said something. I didn't want to lose my job. I did, Brielle replied, not coldly, but with the full weight of reality behind her. That afternoon, Sora and Flame posted a formal statement across all their platforms. We acknowledge that the termination of Brielle Carter was handled in a way that did not reflect our values of diversity, respect, and inclusion. Speaking another language, especially one tied to family and heritage, should never be grounds for dismissal. We sincerely apologize to Brielle and to the broader community. We are reviewing our internal policies and training protocols moving forward. The internet reacted like it always did, with fire and noise. Some praised the apology, others called it performative. A few trolls mocked her name, her story, her voice. But Brielle didn't care. She had spoken her truth, and now it lived beyond her. That evening, she met Maya on a rooftop overlooking Elliott Bay. The wind was colder up there, but the view was worth it. You did it, Maya said, handing her a soda. Brielle took it and stared out over the city. I didn't do it to win. No, Maya said. You did it so they'd finally see. And for the first time in a long time, Brielle let herself breathe. 1 week after the apology, Brielle stood in front of the mirror in a borrowed kitchen classroom, tying a white apron over her t-shirt. The room smelled like garlic and rising dough. It wasn't fancy, no sleek chrome finishes or minimalist decor, but it was exactly what she needed. The knives were sharp, the tables were scarred with use, and every person in the room looked like someone with a story. A place where nobody cared what language you spoke, only that your hands could work and your flavors told the truth. She had used a portion of the settlement to enroll in a part-time culinary program at a local community college. It wasn't about revenge or reinvention. It was a return. Food had always been the quiet pulse of her life. Dumplings with popo, pan-fried tilapia on Sunday nights, adobo recipes scribbled in notebooks. Now she was finally making space for herself to learn, to grow, without apology. Between classes, she started a blog. At first, it was just a collection of recipes and family anecdotes. She called it Bitter-Sweet Tongue. She wrote about her grandfather's favorite egg stew, about using banana leaves instead of foil, about the way language lives in the hands. But before long, the writing shifted. It wasn't just about food. It became about voice. About what it meant to be both too much and not enough in rooms that weren't built for you. About being Black and multilingual. About how identity tastes different depending on who's doing the tasting. The post spread quickly, shared among teacher forums, immigrant circles, cultural collectives. Comments flowed in from people who'd never heard of her before the Sora and Flame incident, but who now felt like they were sitting at her kitchen table. They told her they cried reading her words, that they had been told to speak English at work, that they'd started hiding parts of themselves because someone once flinched at the sound of their accent. A woman from New Orleans wrote, "Your story gave me permission to stop whispering." A high school student from Denver messaged, "I read your post in class. My teacher cried. We all did." It humbled Brielle. It scared her sometimes, too. She hadn't asked for this voice. But life, she realized, has a way of handing you a microphone when you least expect it. And now that it was in her hands, she wasn't going to drop it. She still called Papo every few days. They still spoke in Tagalog. Only now, Brielle answered the phone on speaker in public with ease. Once, in line at the grocery store, a woman turned and said, "That's beautiful. What language is that?" Brielle had smiled, not flinched, and answered proudly, "Tagalog. It's from the Philippines. It's my grandfather's language. Mine too." If anyone around her felt uncomfortable, that was no longer her burden. She learned something in the aftermath. Not just about injustice, but about silence. How silence can be survival, yes, but it can also be surrender. How keeping your head down can feel safe until it's not. How erasure doesn't always look like slurs or fists. Sometimes it sounds like polite language in HR folders. Sometimes it feels like being told your roots are too loud. But Brielle hadn't burned anything down. She hadn't shouted. All she did was speak. And that, in the end, was more than enough. One afternoon, as the spring sun warmed the city and flowers opened along the sidewalks, Brielle stood in a community center courtyard with a table full of home-cooked food. A cultural fundraiser. She'd been asked to contribute a dish, but she brought 3. She wore no apron, no uniform, just her own name on a little name tag. Brielle Carter, food and storyteller. Around her, people laughed and spoke in Swahili, Cantonese, Spanish, Arabic, Korean. The air buzzed with voices layered like music. She looked up at the sky, blue and wide, and smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because she wasn't shrinking anymore. Sometimes the most radical act is simply refusing to be silent. Brielle's story is not just about losing a job. It's about reclaiming dignity in a world that often demands we shrink ourselves to fit someone else's comfort. It's about how language, culture, and identity are not disruptions in professional spaces, but living parts of who we are, worthy of respect, not erasure. The moment Brielle spoke to her grandfather in Tagalog wasn't just a personal exchange. It was a reminder that our heritage doesn't disappear the moment we clock in. Too often, people of color and immigrants are made to feel like speaking their own language is wrong, unprofessional, or threatening. But what's truly threatening is a system that punishes authenticity and rewards conformity. Brielle's refusal to stay quiet sparked a wave. Not because she shouted, but because she stood her ground with grace. She reminded us that your voice matters even when others try to silence it, and that no paycheck is worth your identity. So if you've ever been told to quiet down, blend in, or stick to English, remember this. You do not owe your silence to anyone. Not your job, not your boss, not the world. Now I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? What part of this story spoke to you the most? Drop your city or country in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the Soul and Grace channel for more stories that honor voice, truth, and the power of being unapologetically you.